Hello, dear friends. Today we're going to take a look at the BZ-75 tank tree. It's a new tank tree that recently appeared in our game, and many players are currently wondering whether it's worth investing their time in. Personally, I find this tank interesting because it's the first heavy tank with such a gun in the game, excluding the E100, as it doesn't have high explosive shells like the BZ-75. I'll tell you what to expect on your way to this tank, what difficulties and questions you may encounter while progressing through this tree. Let's dive in. Well, let's start with Tier 7, namely the BZ-58. It's a heavy tank that boasts quite decent armor. Let's begin by breaking down its armor characteristics. Firstly, let's take a look at how the BZ-58 appears in the sights of a medium tank with relatively weak penetration. First and foremost, you'll notice a large grey area at the bottom. This spot is vulnerable to penetration from virtually anything. Additionally, there's a small gap in the armor on the side. If the opponent is even slightly experienced, they can easily penetrate this area. When using premium rounds, it's no trouble to penetrate the cheeks of the turret. And if you turn the turret a bit more, it becomes mostly grey. As for explosive shells, they don't work well against the rear. Now let's take a look from the perspective of a standard heavy tank. The penetration here is a bit higher than on a medium tank, but it's still not the highest. As we can see, the turret is still marked as red and capable of tanking shots. However, the opponent can easily shoot at your commander's hatch, so when playing from the turret, try to move as much as possible. In general, there are no significant differences from a medium tank. So let's see how the BZ-58 looks in the sights of a tank with high penetration. You can notice that even with regular shells, the turret is easily penetrated in the cheeks, and with premium shells, the situation has barely changed. The turret is still halfway grey, although I expected it to become entirely grey. However, the gun and gun mantlet are not penetrable, unlike some other tanks. Additionally, the tank is easily penetrated in the sides and the track rollers even at angles. So, if you're maneuvering in a diamond-shaped formation towards the enemy, do it with utmost caution. As for the gun, it's quite comfortable on this tank. The accuracy is especially pleasing. Despite a relatively slow aim time of 4 seconds, and the numerical accuracy not being the best, playing on this tank was very comfortable and didn't pose any problems. The penetration is average for a Tier 7 heavy tank. 172mm on standard APCR rounds and 245mm on premium heat rounds. This is sufficient to handle Tier 7 and 8 opponents. The damage per shot is 280, and with an almost 8-second reload, the gun has a damage per minute of 2169, which is quite good considering the damage per shot. However, the downside of this gun lies in its vertical gun depression angles, which are only 7 degrees downwards. It's not critical and you can still play effectively, but having 8 or 9 degrees would be superb. As for mobility, you can simply say that the tank is neither fast nor slow. It moves like a typical heavy tank. A maximum speed of 38 km per hour is quite good, and the most important thing is that it accelerates quite rapidly. The engine power of 15 horsepower per ton provides a confident acceleration from a standstill. The overall impression of the tank is positive. The tank feels confident against any opponents, and you won't encounter any problems while playing it. This means you'll quickly progress to Tier 8. Hey folks, exciting news for everyone who's live in the United States. You have the opportunity to snag a free $100 for any products at the TeamU Market. If you haven't heard, TeamU's the place where you can get just about anything, and the best part is their prices are way lower than other stores. To grab that $100, all you need to do is download the app using my link, or enter the promo code you see on the screen. All the details you can see in the description or pinned comment. Happy shopping and enjoy those sweet deals. Here we go, moving on to the BZ-166. The first thing that will please you is the gun. You don't need to research it. You get the top tier gun right away, so no need to struggle. Let's start by examining the armor of this tank. As tradition goes, let's start with weak penetration. At first glance, it seems that the armor is quite strong, and indeed it is. Playing with the BZ-166, I experienced a lot of bounces and non-penetrations in regular battles, so the tank feels confident. However, there are nuances. Firstly, there's a strip on the hull that is easily penetrated, just like the lower frontal part. Even though it appears in red, it can be penetrated without much difficulty. Also, if you slightly angle the hull, you can easily penetrate this area, so playing in a diamond formation won't work for you. Additionally, there are 2 commander's hatches that are vulnerable. Here's how the tank looks with premium rounds. You can notice that the turret becomes half grey as usual, and the sides of the hull also turn grey. Now let's examine the armor with fairly good penetration. Initially, there are almost no differences, the same strip and grey sides. Surprisingly, the track roller holds up quite well, and it's challenging to penetrate it at a steep angle. However, as soon as you load premium rounds, you can easily penetrate it right in the front of the hull. The only thing you need for this is to be close to the tank or slightly above it. Then, the entire upper part of the hull becomes completely grey. And here's the armor from the perspective of a tank destroyer. Even with regular rounds, you can easily penetrate the turret. With premium rounds, the tank becomes entirely grey and the chance of bouncing is practically zero. The track roller is also unable to withstand such high penetration from tank destroyers. So, tanking shots in a diamond formation, especially against tank destroyers, won't work for you. But don't worry, most of your opponents will struggle to penetrate you. I'm speaking from my personal experience. Regarding the gun, here we have not 280 but a whopping 400 damage per shot. However, due to this, the damage per minute did not increase and even slightly worsened compared to the previous tank. The reload time is 11 and 2 seconds. The penetration, on the other hand, is significantly higher, standing at 215mm on standard APCR rounds and a whopping 270mm on premium heat rounds. This is an excellent value. Even against Tier 9 tanks, you won't have problems with penetration. As for accuracy, it's similar to the previous tank. On paper, the numbers might not look great, but in practice, it's enjoyable to play. The shell usually goes where you aim, even if you haven't fully aimed. The vertical gun depression angles are the same as on the previous tank. Overall, I like the gun, and I think you'll like it too, especially considering you get it right from the start with the tank. That's a fantastic bonus. What surprised me is how briskly it moves, considering its excellent armor. It might not turn as quickly as one would wish, but that's about it. A maximum speed of 40 km per hour is an excellent indicator, and most importantly, the tank accelerates confidently to this speed, so you won't have any problems catching up with others. In general, what can be said about the tank is that the armor is indeed very good. You'll be tanking shots frequently, very frequently. Overall, the tank's gameplay is reminiscent of Japanese heavy tanks. They share many similarities. At Tier 9, you have access to what you've been grinding for, the high explosive gun. But first, let's go through the armor. I won't keep you waiting, so here we go. The tank with weak penetration sees the BZ-75 in its sights. Immediately, you notice a huge gray area at the bottom of the hull, and the rest of the tank is all red. Among the vulnerable spots, there's the viewport, a gray area on the side of the hull, and the commander's hatch. Everything is as with its predecessor. Loading premium rounds doesn't change anything, which is reassuring and instills hope. On a tank with average penetration at Tier 9, the situation is the same, but this is only with standard rounds. Load premium rounds, and you can penetrate the turret cheeks and upper hull. However, a tank with high penetration doesn't even feel the armor here. Just take a look at this. With standard rounds, you can easily penetrate the entire hull, and with premium rounds, the whole tank becomes gray and is easily penetrated even in the side of the hull at an angle. So, be cautious of tank destroyers in battles. However, against heavy tanks and especially medium tanks, you'll feel excellent, especially if you play from the turret. The turret has very good armor for this tank, but will the gun allow you to play from the turret? Unfortunately, I think the gun won't allow you to do that. Firstly, it has terrible vertical gun depression angles of only 6 degrees downward, meaning you'll face problems on any hill. Secondly, instead of premium rounds, the gun has high explosive shells. Sure, there's the first gun that would be the right choice for you to play with, but let's be honest, no one will play with it when there's such a potent high explosive gun available. So, to play with this gun, you'll often need to fully expose yourself to the enemy, and therefore you'll frequently take damage in return. Exiting in a diamond formation won't work due to the weak side armor of the hull. But enough about the downsides. Let's focus on the positives. First and foremost, there are premium high explosive shells with penetration as high as 176mm. Admittedly, it's not impressive, but for high explosive shells, it's quite decent. However, when it comes to damage per shot, it's not all that sweet. On standard armor-piercing shells, the damage is 530, which is excellent. But on premium high explosive shells, the damage is only 600, and honestly, you don't feel that you've delivered a hefty high explosive blow to the opponent. It feels like if you were shooting a regular shell, the damage would be the same. Thankfully, there are also regular high explosive shells with a whopping 750 damage, but the penetration on them is only 66mm. Still, I would recommend loading at least 2 of them. You never know when a light or medium tank might present its rear to you. As for the dynamics, it's exactly the same as on the previous tank. You won't feel any difference whatsoever. Therefore, I don't have much more to say about its dynamics. Overall, I can't say that I particularly liked this tank. The previous tanks left a more significant impression on me. However, the armor at Tier 9 feels noticeably more confident against peers. As for the gun, I didn't like it at all. Perhaps the Tier 10 will bring more positive emotions. Guys, this is my first time making a video like this for you, and it would be very helpful for me to know whether you like such videos or not. So please, write in the comments what you think about this, and if you would like to see more of these videos on the channel. Now let's finally get to the crown of this tech tree, the BZ-75. And here it's much more interesting than at Tier 9. First and foremost is the armor. Just look at this armor. Finally, there's no gray zone on the side of the hull, and now you can finally play in a diamond formation. Of course, the commander's hatches haven't gone anywhere, but fortunately, they aren't particularly large. It's also worth noting that the hull is shaped like a pike nose, similar to the IS-7, for example. So during a shootout with the enemy, don't turn the hull. Stand straight with the front towards the enemy, making it harder for them to penetrate you. It's also worth noting that even with premium rounds, the armor is still red, and almost nothing has changed. For medium and light tanks, this will be a truly formidable opponent. But what about heavy tanks? And here everything is still excellent. Penetrating the BZ-75 with standard rounds will be challenging even for a heavy tank with good penetration. But even if you load premium rounds, everything remains quite decent. Of course, the hull will be easier to penetrate, but we're playing from the turret and the turret still remains red. The key is always to watch the enemy and not expose the vulnerable turret cheeks. Against tank destroyers, everything is also excellent. Standard rounds with penetration around 300mm, and the tank remains quite problematic to penetrate, especially if it's moving. But load premium rounds, and that's it. The tank is entirely grey, and you can forget about bouncing shots. You become as penetrable as a light tank. In defense, I can say that not all players use premium rounds, and in fairness, any heavy tank would look the same on premium rounds against a tank destroyer. So in conclusion, the armor on the BZ-75 is genuinely good, and you can rely on it in battle. Now let's take a look at the gun. Here, like its predecessor, there are two guns to choose from, but now both guns are genuinely interesting. Honestly, I like the first stock gun more, and I would prefer to play with it. I believe any professional would also choose this gun. Let's start by examining it. Damage per shot is 460 units, which is the gold standard for Tier 10 heavy tanks. Reload time is 11 seconds with change, which is actually a fairly average indicator among its peers. Damage per minute is 2458 units. It's not a lot, but it's manageable. Even the IS-7 has lower DPM. Penetration is also standard for heavy tanks. 273mm on standard rounds and 358mm on premium rounds. In battles, the tank doesn't seem to have any problems with penetration, so you don't need to worry about that. What pleased me was the accuracy. After playing with the high explosive gun and then switching to this one, it felt like I was playing with the Grill 15. Seriously, this gun is very pleasant and almost every shot goes straight to the target. Perhaps the good stabilization has influenced this, as the numbers again indicate not so great accuracy, just like on all tanks in this tech tree. But in battle, they all play very comfortably and without problems. Moreover, this gun has a vertical aiming angle of -8 degrees, which is quite comfortable. In general, I really like this gun and I will exclusively play with it. Now let's look at the second gun, the one that almost all players will use. First, it's worth noting that the damage per shot is now higher than on the previous gun. If the premium heat shells had a damage of 600 units here, the premium heat shells have a whopping 780 units of damage. It's just delightful. But this is simultaneously a drawback. While you are playing at Tier 9, you won't be able to enjoy such high damage. Along with the increased damage per shot, other characteristics have also improved. Firstly, penetration has become better, which is understandable. On standard rounds, it's 263mm, and on premium heat shells, it's 198mm. I think this will be enough to penetrate the frontal armor of medium tanks and the side armor of heavy tanks. Accuracy is, of course, terrible. It's not a KV-2, but your shots will often go where you don't want them to. And that's incredibly frustrating. Considering that these are heat shells, any spaced armor can ruin your shot. I won't even talk about the damage per minute, it's only 2151, which is very low. However, it's silly to expect high damage per minute from such a gun. Overall, the gun is interesting, but not for playing for results. Moreover, you need to research it separately, and it costs a significant amount of experience, 70,000 to be precise. So in any case, you will play with both guns and decide which one you prefer. Now let's look at the tank's dynamics. The tank's mobility has hardly changed. It moves similarly to its predecessor, almost identical. On average, you will be moving at a speed of 30 kilometers per hour, which is sufficient not to fall behind your allies. Considering the good armor, it's quite respectable. Can I recommend leveling up this tech tree to you? The answer isn't straightforward. If you're looking for a tank for a fresh experience, go ahead and level it up. The tech tree is quite user-friendly and won't take much time to progress through. In return, you'll get a unique gameplay experience with a Hesh high explosive shells. However, if you're seeking a tank for competitive play, it's definitely not worth progressing to the BZ-75. It's better to invest in something else. Luckily, I have videos on this topic available on my channel. Alright friends, I hope you really enjoyed this type of video because there are plenty of different tanks in the game, which means I can create many more videos for you. We've also reached almost 15,000 subscribers, which is just fantastic. And that means another giveaway is coming from me. Keep an eye on my videos. See you soon. Bye for now.